Let's give him a round of applause or virtual a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you, Mujahid, for that introduction. And also to the MSU History Department in Marawi and also the other as well organizers of this international webinar talk on mainstreaming Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness of the Filipinos. Well, since there are many students here attending this forum, I will just have to share my notes so that everyone can easily understand where I am uh, discussing at. So if you can see in my notes, I have more than 10 challenges and possible solutions for to mainstream Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness of the of Filipinos. As you can see, the first thing that I think I identify in the first challenge that I identify regarding problems on how to mainstream Bangsamoro history in the Philippines is that when you talk about the Bangsamoro, it is always mired by conflicts and insurgencies. So that's reason why you can take a look at many and ask Filipinos in Metro Manila what do they think about the Bangsamoro or the Moro people. They might say that it's full of insurgents, it's full of warring people. Um, that's reason why they can't even think about any good thing or the good life that is somehow should be accorded to the Bangsamoro people, or even the struggle, the historical injustices that the Bangsamoro have experienced for over millennia. And of course, the possible solution for this is the Barm Peace Process settlement, especially the enactment of the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the a building up of institutions that would serve uh, the, I think I would say, the struggles and the socio-economic life of the Moro people. And this institution should also be the institution that will spearhead in providing awareness for the Bangsamoro, that it's not only mired and uh, full of conflicts and insurgencies, but the Bangsamoro region is also full of beautiful things that we can see if the Filipinos in the north, in Visayas, and even in our neighboring Mindanaoan regions could have the opportunity to visit uh, the Bangsamoro people region. And the second, I would say, challenge in mainstreaming the Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness of the Filipinos is that um, when you go to the public platform of let's say conventional media and even in social media, there are a stanch of negative depictions and somehow at the cross border of discriminatory against the Bangsamoro people. Um, we have seen this for example, remember in the recent kidnapping, I would say, tragic event that happened uh, where the kidnappers, I think this has happened with Senator Leila de Lima, and the those who kidnap or those who were purported to kidnap, uh, or not. Actually, it's not about issue of kidnapping, but it's issue about conflict within that certain vicinity where Senator Leila de Lima has experienced such a tragic event, where the quote unquote Muslim prisoners, or they call it Muslim prisoners, as the perpetrators of this uh, uh, tragedy. And I think Senator Robin Padilla and even Congressman Zia Alonto have strongly, expressed their opposition of putting the word Muslim in as an adjectival form to words such as terrorist or words such as um, criminals. And I remember that I was invited to comment on certain legislations, House bills, regarding how to uh, provide some kind of safety nets and also to provide some kind of persecution or punishment for public media personalities or public media companies that would depict and discriminate certain, ethnicity or certain religious groups in the Philippines. But in this case, the House bill was directly addressing to the Muslims in the Philippines. So, a possible solution for this is legislate laws that will address discriminatory and negative depictions of Moros and Muslims in public media. There are some kind of probably, you know, general perception that when you talk about Moros, there are 100% Muslims, but there are also Moros who are Christians, and those who are convert as well. And we've seen this when I had the opportunity to talk to Professor Diampuan. He stated that it's not only 13 ethno-linguistic communities that comprises Moro.
Sorry, Nassef. I think we can't hear you right now. Your sound went off.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Hello? I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulty with my headset. So just remind me if certain, technical flaws in my speaker and headset commences so that I could address it directly. So the members of the parliament in the regional government can legislate laws that will address this certain portion of discrimination and negative depictions in the public media, even in the multiple publics in the society. And another, I think, possible solution for this is not only the members of the parliament that can legislate laws, but I think local ordinances um, in many municipalities, city government, and regions. The Sangguniang Bayan can also legislate local ordinances to address this issue and also strengthen local tourism in Barm region by inviting, for example, Manileños or people from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanaoan, neighboring Mindanaoan regions. Um, by strengthening local tourism, especially, for example, to emphasize, food tourism. I think one of the strengths of Bangsamoro is through food. Uh, if only many of the Filipinos can try Maranao, Maguindanao, Tausug, or even Yakan and Sama food, they would really love this food as a way to orient and start a kind of a dialogue and conversation so that uh, non-Moros can have a certain of awareness and orientation so that when they remember, oh, I've tried this papiaran or I've tried this randang from Maranao and Maguindanao. and they were very delicious. I think it's a way to you know uh, think of something goodness by when you ask Filipinos about the Bangsamoro. Of course, if you're going to invite and strengthen local tourism, you need to also strengthen the public safety and security and order in the region so that um, there won't be any problems whenever Manileños or people in the Visayas and neighboring regions in Mindanao would visit the Barm region. So we'll go to the challenge, a third challenge. And this is, I think, a perennial problem, a lack of collective histories and narratives. Let me just go here. Bangsamoro as a social identity is actually contested. You can take a look at some, Facebook groups, Facebook pages, but also within the circles of political elites and academics regarding the how they contest the word Moro. They wanted to, even especially from the people of Sulu, they have this Bangsa Sug. So it's the nation of the Tausug people, or Bangsa Sama, the nation of the Sama, and they don't want to be associated with the term Moro because of, because of, actually, academically speaking, it has a pejorative term with regards to the history and I would say the origin of the nomenclature term Moro. Uh, so how can we connect the Moors in Spain or even in North Africa as a kind of a social connection or historical connection with the people in Mindanao, even during the pre-colonial times. So you have many different dynamics. You have the hegemonic history of the Maranaos, the hegemonic history of the Magindanaoans, and the hegemonic history of the Tausug, because usually these are the three, I would say, tripartite major political groups in the Bangsamoro. And how can we find a common denomination or a common voice to have a collective Bangsamoro history and narratives among the people in the region? Um, One possible solution that I could suggest to everyone is uh, sta- provide platforms or programs that would uh, um, start a consensual decision making among historians and scholars on Bangsamoro history. So we all know, even in Islamic parlance, that one of the sources of Islam is the consensus among scholars, among ulamas. But in this case, there has to be a consensual and mutual, I would say, collaboration among historian scholars on Bangsamoro history so that we could achieve a collective identification of Bangsamoro history. And the fourth, I would say, challenge to mainstream Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness is that there are scarcity of written histories and undocumented oral histories. But I was thankful when I look at the Ateneo de Manila archives that somehow they have a repository of oral histories, like for example the Darangin of Maranao in Ateneo. You have They have certain collections of these oral and written histories on Bangsamoro uh, among the 13 ethno-linguistic communities. But it is a fact that there is a scarcity of written histories and undocumented oral histories on Bangsamoro. So what one thing that I could suggest to everyone as a possible solution is institutional building on data bank. We need to establish data bank. And also probably we could, analyze data science so that we could have an advanced methodology and software that could help us document written histories and oral histories on Bangsamoro. So we need to establish data bank, and I think this would entail funding, public funding from local government units and also the BARM government as well. The challenge also, the fifth challenge that let me go here. The fifth challenge that I think um, a challenge to mainstream Bangsamoro history in the national Filipino consciousness is that we need to face this as a factual that there is ethno-communal distrust among Bangsamoros. So there are, stories, negative history stories, for example, among Maranaos against the Magindanaons, against the Tausugs, or Magindanaons against the Maranaos. Uh, in fact, I have anecdotes about this because it was my first time to come to Cotabato City, where majority of inhabitants here are Magindanaons, and I was actually told not to eat Magindanaon food, and I said, why? Because of certain, uh, paranoia about if you eat Magindanaon food, then you will, uh, have some kind of negative something in your body, or they have, black magic, some sort of. And that's also the same case when I talk to some Magindanaons, they are also prohibited to eat Maranao food. So this certain kind of paranoia and distrust among Bangsamoros is a stumbling block on mainstreaming a collective history on Bangsamoro to the national consciousness of the Filipinos. So I think that it is also about time to have, as a possible solution, to have a intracultural dialogue programs and projects, funded by BARM, by LGUs, and also by civil society organizations. Yeah. Well, CSOs are also a partner by many development partners, and also by grassroots people that would probably start a research and start a kind of program to have an intra dialogue among Maranaos, among Magindanaons, Tausug, among others. So we need to probably first settle out this ethno-communal distrust among the Moros. And the sixth challenge to mainstream Bangsamoro history towards a national consciousness, to be part of the national consciousness of the Filipinos, is that we need to face this as a fact as well, that there is a lack of research fund allocated to Bangsamoro history by LGUs and BARM. Um, but I was glad that there was a signing of memorandum of agreement between a BARM office, the Bangsamoro Historical Preservation of Culture, and the Mindanao State University as a system to spearhead. And I think Dr. Trimisi is part of this, and I think many other faculty members of the MSU Marawi History Department are also part of this, to write uh, a, I would say a comprehensive Bangsamoro history funded by the BARM government. So this lack of research fund would really limit historians and researchers to concentrate on Bangsamoro history, and what could be the impact if we're going to study and do research work on Bangsamoro history to the present modern lives of the Bangsamoro. So the possible solution for this is that, which I can see, uh, there is a big black.
Sorry, Nassef, we can't hear you
Again.
again.
Okay, let me just.
Sir, okay.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes po.
Yes,
Go ahead,
yes.
Nassef.
Okay, select a speaker. Just a second. How about this one? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear you.
yes. Perfect.
Okay, I'll change my headset to the speaker of my laptop
Pwede siya
because
po.
microphone. Okay,
Tahong
select the
ito.
speaker.
Pusit.
Okay, so the sixth challenge that I was talking about is the lack of research fund. And I think this is a trend. Even in the US, the US Congress had stopped providing research fund to social sciences, especially in the fields fields and knowledge bodies of philosophy and history. I think even here, the national government, when I talk to some UN officials, if we're going to compare the research and development funding allocated by ASEAN member countries, for example, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore and Thailand, they allocate at least more than 1% of their GDP to research and development projects. But if if they but for the Philippines, it is 0.0001%, where the national funding provides public funding on research R&D projects. So as you can see the priorities of the state system, not only the state system but LGUs. But I know that in the internal revenue allotment era budget of local government units, they have a certain portion on research expense, which even in the BARM, in many ministries, they have this research expense allotment. But I don't know how they disperse this funding and utilize this funding. So at least we need to lobby to our local government units and to the BARM government to allocate a certain portion of the block grant and also a certain portion of the LGU's era funding on Bangsamoro historical research works. And we can even lobby with the MPs, members of the parliament, and with LG Sangguniang Bayan to legislate laws or craft a bill and craft an ordinance to provide funding on historical research works. So I think this is a task among Bangsamoro historians to have a proper coordination with LGUs and the BARM government so that they could enact some bills or resolution to provide public funding on Bangsamoro history research works. The seventh challenge that I can see and in mainstreaming Bangsamoro history is that there are scarcity of historians, scholars, and writers on Bangsamoro history, and declining traditional oral historians, especially among our elders who are now in their twilight years of their lives, that they can only remember certain portion of their historical memories about the Bangsamoro, or even probably even sing darangin, or even sing other short stories on Bangsamoro. But I think the Tarsila or Sarsila is very strong in during wedding ceremonies to to even provide a lineage of your family back to the family of the prophet. There's many claims on that Tarsila or Sarsila oral traditional history. But I think the possible solution to provide to have more historians, Bangsamoro historians, and
I only speak for historians that concentrate on and focus on Bangsamoro history, because we can have many historians, but they have probably different historical interests or research interests probably on non-Bangsamoro. So we need to market, as a possible solution, to market history degree programs that directly specializes on Bangsamoro histories at state universities and colleges and private academic institutions, and as well as document traditional oral histories. I'm very glad that, as I mentioned a while ago, Ateneo de Manila have this repository of traditional oral histories in some sectors of the Bangsamoro. Um, the eighth challenge that I can also tell to everyone here, and I think this is the most difficult part. There is an extreme difficulty to extract and explore pre-colonial Bangsamoro history. So usually when we talk about historical past, the Bangsamoro, they usually starts from the, coming in of Islam, or when many of our ancestors embraced Islam. Usually when you talk about pre-colonial Bangsamoro history, it always starts with the Islamic period, but in pre-Islamic period of the Bangsamoro. And I think this is also has something to do with ulamas or religious scholars that have depicted that pre-Islamic period is where you can find the state of ignorance or jahiliyyah, which is very, have been mainstream among the psychological psyche or memory of many, or minds of the Moros and Muslims in the Philippines, that they don't talk about pre-Islamic period, but because it was a state of jahiliyyah or ignorance. That's part of a factor that probably constrained people to even study or learn about our ancestors before the arrival of Islam. So, and another factor that affects the difficulty on exploring pre-colonial Bangsamoro history is that our documentation for pre-colonial history is not the same as you go to Turkey or Greece or in the Mediterranean when they study Mesopotamia or the Sumerians. All of their historical, I would say, archiving process is actually cemented on stones and even on steel. So it is easy for them to extrapolate their archives history because it was written on stones. But for the Bangsamoro, most of our I would say pre-colonial evidence were written on bamboos, on trees, on leaves, which can easily be, destroyed by natural calamities such as storm, typhoons, and other, earthquakes. That's the reason why it was very hard for us to even have, evidence of what really happened in our past before the arrival of Islam. So it was really written on very vulnerable trees, leaves, or bamboos, or other type of trees that can easily be destroyed by natural calamities. So possible solution for this that I can suggest to everyone is to explore decolonial research methods to document pre-colonial Bangsamoro history. And this is one of my advocacy when I call on UP and other academics as well when we established the Decolonial Studies program under the UP Center for Integrative Development Studies, and also the Decolonial Studies Research Network, where we explore decolonial research methods, decolonial studies, not only when we speak of academic, but we also speak about how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world and our praxis, our normative live realities to somehow decolonize ourselves. So you need to decolonize when you try to learn and unlearn from your formative years of learning, because many of the books and textbooks when we were in elementary, high school, even in college, were in the perspective of the West or the white authors who, have been the hegemony in our reference materials. So we really need to explore decolonial research methods so that we can have a way and approaches to document pre-colonial Bangsamoro history. And the ninth challenge, or that I can also think of about challenge the mainstream Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness of the Philippines is that, and you can see this in the writings of Cesar Mahul, Najib Salibi, and among other well-known scholars when they wrote history of the Muslims in the Philippines or the history of Sulu, that many of those literatures on Bangsamoro history are only aligned to nation-state perspectives. So they start from colonization, wars, the peace process, settlements. It doesn't speak of different, social, economic, communal, philosophical, and other angles on history in the perspective of the we perspective or pantayong pananaw of the Moro people. For example, a possible solution is to emphasize variety of historical perspectives from the vantage point of the 13 ethno-linguistic communities. What is the history in the we perspective or the pantayong pananaw of the Badjao, of the Iranon, the Jama Mapon, Calagan, Kalibugan, Palawanon, Molbo, Samasangil, and Yakan. Yes, we have have somehow good number of I would say even a good quantity of history about the Maranaos, Maguindanao, and Tausug, but we don't have any historians or anyone who would really be interested to explore the other groups, communities in the Bangsamoro. And the last challenge in mainstreaming Bangsamoro history is this one. CHED and DepEd accredited textbooks or history textbooks contain meager data on Bangsamoro history and narratives. And the worst is, if you're going to read many of these, textbook, they contain unverified and incorrect historical facts. It's not only prevalent in history textbook, but also prevalent in other, general subjects. So there is really a need to validate historical facts and data by, on Bangsamoro by well-qualified Moro historians. So these are the things that I can share it with you, the 10 challenges to mainstream Bangsamoro history in the national consciousness of the Philippines and possible solutions. And looking forward to our reactor, Dr. Tiramizi, and probably the insights from the attendees and participants of this webinar. And I'll end up here and apologize that I have to leave early because I need to present my budget to the Parliament. Actually, they already started the budget meeting at 9 a.m. But I'll try my best to stay longer so I could hear our discussant who will provide kind of his insights to this presentation. So thank you, Aldine. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nassef. I think